All right, so we're recording this. I don't know who's going to find it interesting and not, but we're going to discuss like, hey, we've got a dependency list. Hey, we've got a license list. Should we combine them? Is combining them an absolutely terrible idea? If we do combine them, what things do we have to consider? And so this is just throw random stuff out there. That's the agenda. It's very high tech. One thing that was shared was, and this is a really good call out, there is a discrepancy between the languages that are supported currently. So dependencies and licenses are not necessarily going to have a complete overlap, because depending on your project, we may not be able to find both. Where does everyone want to start?
I just want to ask a quick question. So when we say like merging dependency lists and license lists, we're focused on the user interface parts, right? We're talking about the pages underneath the security compliance tab.
Correct. I would, and let's note that down. That's a good call out. And so I'm going to say, Nicole, no, Mo, it's your fault. Would this be UI only? And so I think that we would still want the scanners to be separate, or analyzers. I always mess that up. We want the technical doodads to be separate, but the UI interface I would potentially want to be merged. And then
I'm not also trying to prescribe on the back-end solution in terms of like how the analyzers are done, but I think what I'm trying to understand the problem, and the problem as I understand it is that there's a bit of, for a customer coming to the security compliance tab, they see this dependency list page and this license compliance page. And when you click on one, there's some info on one side and there's some info on the other side when there's a bit of overlap. And I think that's the overlap that we're concerned with. And we're trying to establish whether or not there's enough overlap that we can actually combine these two pages, and then all the actions that they would take on either page can be done from a single interface rather than having some data on one page and some data on another. Am I paraphrasing okay?
Yes and no.
Yes and no, okay. Help me understand the no.
There's a lot of overlap between them. So, why not put them together? But the other part of it is that in some cases, for my particular use case, I may actually need the combination of data to be useful. So like for right now,
I see.
You could be coming at this information in a bunch of different ways. You could be coming at this information from, I'm a legal person and I need to make sure that we don't have licenses in the project that I deem to be dangerous to my organization. And I don't care about the dependency nonsense. However, the dependency nonsense is going to be necessary when I see that there's a license I don't like, that I would like to deny, where I need to now notify developers, okay, as a result of me denying license X, I now need you to remove dependency Y. I don't actually care about the dependency, but when I create an issue or create an action as a result of something I've done, somebody else is going to care about the dependency. In other cases, I may just need to be creating like a list of, hey, what's included in our software? Well, that's going to be your dependency plus your license plus your version plus whatever. And so to the question you kind of asked earlier, I would want the scans to happen on the back end separately, but on the front end, I would want a UI to be potentially combined, but filterable to my use case. But I also might want an export. And that's something that's been in the backlog for a little bit, because I may have legal asking me for a list and they don't want to log in, or they don't have a login, whatever.
So by export, you mean I may want to see all the data, filter it, slice it however I need to, and then export it to CSV, export it to
be determined the format, but I'm thinking CSV is kind of a safe, everybody can do what
process
they
that
want.
in some way.
Yeah.
Okay. And right now, for let's say someone who wanted to get a list of licenses that we currently have in a project that are puts our organization out of compliance with whatever policies we have in place. They go to license compliance, and we don't have any sort of export function. We have some filters on name. I think we're continuously working on those filters. But once we slice the page down to the data set that we want to export it. But there's also cases where we need data from both dependency list and license.
Think of it this way. If I came into license list right now,
yeah,
I would have to do a little bit more work. And some of it's just work we need to get to. But if I've decided that an undefined is now a deny, I've got to do a bit of legwork to
go filter out those dependencies and
like what dependencies
issues.
Now do developers need to get rid of,
or find alternatives to that are that have licenses associated. Okay.
So Cindy chucked in a question: what is the benefit to customers specifically? And that's kind of what I'm having this meeting for. Like, I see some benefits, but there can also be some downsides. So one benefit is, I think you tend to need the information sometimes. So like in the scenario that I had mentioned, is that if I decide to deny a license, what do we need to replace as a result, as an example. And then to Cindy's next point, different users, would they be confused by seeing both together? And this is actually one that I'm concerned about. And that's why I was saying maybe we should have filters. Yep, go for it.
Can we ask some customers their opinion, or what they think?
So Kyle and I want to have a couple ideas first and make some mocks and then shop the mocks around. So first I wanted to see if anybody found any really good gotchas. Like, definitely one we're going to have to consider is, how do we explain that this list isn't complete because of the language discrepancies? So we wanted to figure out the gotchas to work them in the UI, make 1 or 2 designs, and then do some kind of survey or interviews to be like, you know, you were interested in licenses, or you were interested in dependencies, or you're interested in just doing MRs. Is the screen overwhelming? Like, what do you think of the screen? Can you find what you want? Can you not find what you want?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, my biggest concern in combining them is, one, getting the customer feedback, and I mean, maybe UX could do some research for you on that, and then the other would be mapping it to the way that analysts talk about it. Like, will it ever cause them confusion on what we're doing, so they end up just going blah over the whole thing? You know, that kind of happens sometimes. If it's not in their frame of reference,
not in their terminology.
Mm-hmm. I mean, on the other hand, it could be a thought leadership thing, but that's kind of a line there that we walk. Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, we have on the license compliance page there, like, we already have detected in project in the policies tab. I mean, just to test this out so we're not blowing away what we already have, could we just add a new tab with the combined stuff? I mean, we would still need to do the back end work, but at least we're not getting rid of what we already have, but then we're just providing them another tab or another view to accommodate a different workflow they may have, and then revisit it to be like, okay, we're seeing, I don't know, I mean, if we've added any metric tracking to what we have now, but we could at least see, oh, users are using this tab more than the other tab. Let's, you know, focus on that and get rid of the old stuff. My concern is that
before we released anything, like, new tab, that could totally be a solution. Have your dependencies, have your licenses, have your combined or whatever. But whatever it is, I definitely want to make like a low cost mock and like kick it around for a couple weeks with some people first, because we might get an instant I hate it before we even do it.
Like, it wouldn't be that hard to well, I mean, it'd be weird to have it in both places, but we could embed the dependency list view as a tab in license compliance as a cheat test, because it's like, that way it's on a tab and you don't have to like go between pages. You just go between tabs, and it's a lot more responsive. So it's very quick to tab between, as opposed to like load another page, because going between the license compliance and the dependency list page is a whole page.
Multiple clicks. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a tab, it's quick because it's preloaded. We are not blowing away the data every time we tab through. So like what I would suggest for now. But
I like that idea. On the backend Rails part, we're doing some magic to like merge some of the data from the dependency list and the license list reports. And so we're unnecessarily doing that in some places so that the data can be utilized in one place and data can be utilized in another. So if we were to do what Fernando was sort of suggesting, I support that. I think is what I'm saying. I don't know exactly what the visuals would look like, but so I'm picturing the detected in project, which shows us the list of the licenses. We've got policies, and then I think what you said, Fernando, is like there'd be another tab specifically for just the dependencies. So maybe it's like a matter of renaming the page from license compliance to something more abstract that matches the needs of both licenses and dependencies. And still utilizing the existing code that was done there, because it for what the reasons that Fernando mentioned, it's responsive, it's it's what he's currently working on, so he has a good understanding of current code. Any objections to that or concerns that we're overlooking? I'm naive in the sense that I don't know the full context of the existing dependency list page and the nuances around that. So I don't know what we'd be losing if we did that.
I think for me, the only concern is, and probably when I guess I could reach out to Kyle, is that we had added the whole like recently the policy violation badge and the banner and stuff. So like some of those workflows, I want to make sure that don't get confused. Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, because it's like, I feel like if we try to do too much in one page, then it may make some existing workflows confusing, but I mean, that's up to you, Nicole, to kind of decide, but at least that's my feedback from a front end perspective. And at least adding a new tab would at least give us flexibility to, if we want to roll back some of the ideas we don't have in terms of development, engineering effort, it's less for us. As my concern is that we change the functionality, we get rid of what we had before, and then we take a step back and we have making more work for ourselves. Adding a new tab would be a good first iteration, at least from the front end development. Just adding it, we're not changing anything, it's just that we're adding something new. And then if we want to go back and refine, then I could certainly go back and do whatever you guys want to do once we learn from, get feedback and stuff. So.
You mentioned Kyle. I wonder if Kyle's already had some ideas or has been thinking about this, and if he would be.
I know he and I have been thinking about it roughly. I'm not sure how deeply, and this is why I scheduled this meeting, is because I think we were both like, this might be a good idea, this might be a bad idea, we should dig into it more. And so hence the meeting.
I'd spoken with Kyle about this last week or so, and he was hoping for some advice on how this might look, and I had no idea, because my feeling on it was that as a developer, kind of like what Fernando was saying, we're putting too much information on one page. We have dependencies, we have licenses, we have vulnerabilities as well, and the dependency list is more about what vulnerabilities are my dependencies exposing me to, whereas the license list page is more about what licenses have I implicitly agreed to. And that's there's two sort of perspectives on related issues, but there's no link between licenses and vulnerabilities, for instance, that putting it all together, well,
I mean, like, let's just say magically we had one chunk of data that had all of the information. So it has your dependency, your version, your license, so on and so forth. Circling back to kind of the tabbing idea, but skipping ahead maybe a couple iterations. What if it was all the same information, but sorted and grouped and displayed differently when you picked different tabs? So it's all the exact same data, but it's like, I want a license-centric view, I want a dependency-centric view, or I want a exportable SBOM view. And the exportable SBOM view is like the fugly baby, or no, I'm not supposed to use that. It's just the CSV list where it's not beautiful, but I know that it's not beautiful, but I'm exporting it for a particular purpose. But like the first 2 tabs are very geared to that particular mental use case. And so maybe the first list with licenses is grouping it all together for licenses. And then the next one is dependencies, grouping it by dependencies with their vulnerabilities, you know, that kind of thing. But it, like, just pretending we've made all the information available, we're just grouping and displaying it differently on the 2 tabs. Would that be insanely hard, or?
I mean, from the front end, it'd be easy. We hit the endpoint. So this is more effort on the back end, how they want to wrangle that data. Because I know we get it, like the stuff we get now is like wrangled, data is wrangled, formatted, and just made presentable to us. So yeah.
I'm not sure what data is missing. So I'm having a bit of hard time answering that, because right now the license compliance page has the list of policies that are configured by our, the owners of the project, which is to say that this is the classification we've applied to each of these software licenses. It's got the software license name, the SPDX identifier, the URL for the license, the dependency name. I don't think we have version at the moment, like dependency version, which I think is a little more important for NPM, where you have projects with multiple versions of the same dependency, which is hard to see currently. And I'm not sure what data we have that's in the dependency list. Do you know, Fernando, from the API endpoints? Like what data you're getting there that isn't in license compliance?
Data I'm getting that isn't in it.
That you would need, I guess.
Well, right now, I have, like, honestly, I'd be guessing right now, but I do know, other than what's shown in the UI, I could circle back and get you the exact fields, because I know there's a lot of stuff we don't necessarily use that's available. But I mean, from the UI that's consumed is like the license name, it has a URL, and then the classification, if it's like allowed or denied. That's on the detected in licenses page, and then the policies will return the name, and like, again, like if it's been allowed or denied, and you could change it. That's about it in terms of what I actually consume. The other stuff, I'm not sure, because I'm not using it.
That reminds me of an issue I should have created, but right now to display the license URL and I think the description, we rely on data in the report. So if you've configured a software policy for a license, let's say MIT, but MIT's never been discovered in any of the reports, and we can't show you a URL today because we don't have that data available in the database or anywhere else except for making a trip to the SPDX JSON endpoint. So that can lead to some inconsistencies in the UI in terms of when a URL is shown and not shown. I'd love for some of those pieces of data, such as the URL associated with the software license, since we've already got the software license in the software licenses table, to be able to store that next to it. That way it's consistently shown when that software license is shown, and it's not dependent on whether there is a report or if it was found in the report or not. So I'll create an issue to discuss that. But nothing jumps out at me as not possible in terms of providing the backend data, to circle back onto the effort involved to do that. I think one other piece that we did have was maybe the path of where it was detected in the dependency list. I don't think we provide that today in the license list. So
you have the link in the chat, Move, if you want to take a look at there's a JSON.
Oh,
I already added it to the notes.
You haven't said much, Philippe, but I think that you know quite a bit about this topic. Is there things that we're overlooking or need to be concerned about?
So I think I brought that to the attention of Kyle in the first place, where in our one-on-ones we started discussing about a more component-centered view, because I find the current situation a bit disturbing, a bit confusing for the users, where if you have license compliance, for example, or license scanning enabled on your project, we will be reporting licenses referring to components that are actually dependencies, but there's no link in there. That's a dead end. When you want to start thinking about these dependencies, there is no link or whatsoever. So I started to brainstorm with Kyle about how can we make that more component centric. Because in the end, if you have a problem with the vulnerability, if you have a problem with the license, you don't have a problem with the license itself. You have a problem with the component in the first place. You're not going to do anything with the license. You're going to do something with the component. You're either accepting the risk for the license, or you change the components, or you just say to the person that wanted to introduce that component, you are doing something wrong here, where you're not allowed to use that because of this, or that, because the component is not whitelisted. That's a security issue or a license issue. So I think we should start thinking about that in the first place. And from there, what are the different use cases that we want to put in place? So having a view for the BOM, for example, the software bill of materials, that really makes sense to me, but it has to be linked together. So right now we are duplicating a lot of efforts between dependency scanning and license compliance, whereas it should be something very tight for me. And I already suggested that in the past, where we should even have the same layers when it comes to the detection of the licenses, because in the end, we're detecting components again. So that should be shared with me. But I'm thinking about a very far future here.
So one thing I heard you say is that like maybe we can describe the problems in terms of like user stories. Like, so I know this is a little old school, but if we were to say something like, as a developer, I want to be able to go to the or the dependency URL when I find a dependency in the license list so that I can learn more about it. And so starting from that point, figuring out how to achieve those goals. Because I think right now
honestly, if you're the developer making an MR, I want you to see it in the merge request report. I don't want you to have to go to the page. In my mind, and people can tell me like, this is not how this works, but I always figured it would be someone who was new to a project or a manager of a project who would be looking at these lists, because they want to look at a more holistic, okay, for this project, what dependencies have I got? Whereas if I'm doing work right now, I need to know, is this dependency vulnerable? What version is this? Eventually we'd like to be able to say, hey, this is a major version out of date. Do you really want to add that? Here's the license, it is allowed, it is denied, or your company hasn't made a decision on it yet. You might want to double check so that you don't add it and then get it denied and have to come back and remove it. So that all I see as being necessary in the merge request area. For the dependency list, I see a manager coming in, or I see a project manager coming in, because sometimes like we have customers who say, are you using any Python 2? I will not use your product if you've got Python 2. Or are you using any X? I won't use your product if you're using X. And then I see the legal list, or the license list being more like your legal compliance people checking that. But to your point of a user story, if I come in from the dependency thing, I need to be able to see, oh, well, I'm using this 2 different versions of this dependency. We need to fix this older one. And so I, as a manager, need to talk to my dev and get that version updated. Or if I'm coming in from the legal perspective, to Philippe's point, it's like, okay, that is related to these 3 dependencies. I now need to have this conversation with 3 different people. So I kind of like the idea that was proposed earlier of making it tabs. So almost for the use, for the personas, we've got the same view sliced in different ways on different tabs for the different personas, but it's all in one place. So if anybody goes to look, it's all there for them.
So have we like listed out these user stories from the perspective of the different roles and what they're trying to accomplish?
On the jobs to be done page, we have some high level versions of that. There's like a whole jobs to be done page with a ton of different ones, but they're all pretty high level. We could probably dig into some more specific user flows for a job to be done.
I think for me personally, I'd love to see an issue created that actually just describes each one of those user stories that you mentioned there. Like, as a manager, I want to see the list of licenses so that I can see if we're within compliance. As a blah, blah, blah.
Well, we do them on, it's literally a page on the website that says, for this persona, I need to accomplish X. And then there's a UX score next to it saying like, this got an F because I can't actually do it successfully. And so you may want to start there and then tell us specifically what's missing from that, because that's what I work off of when I'm coming up with problems to solve. Is I look at the jobs to be done and it says persona is trying to accomplish X and completely failed according to UX because when they tried to do the workflow, they couldn't find it or whatever.
So if we were to capture that on the web page and like convert that to just an independent issue for each one of those things, can we solve that one particular story at a time? And then over time, we can see whether the choices we're making helps resolve other issues. Because right now, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to pick a solution that will cover most of those issues all at once. And we're not quite sure if we're actually solving one or some. So if we focused on one at a time, I think that would allow us to move forward a little bit more iteratively.
Possibly. I like the tabby idea because my original concern was if we do it and we break two personas to fix one persona, oh no. But if we do like this tabby thing, then I think we're a little safer and we could do, like you were saying, one persona at a time without worrying about breaking the other personas.
Yeah, my previous experience tells me, I like the tabby idea, but I don't want to also make that choice without the influence of UX. And so I would like to abstract the problem.
A method of seeing it per persona, whatever that is.
So in the past, like the way we solve this problem, I mean, we really going back to what you had said earlier, Nicole, about like, imagine if we had this giant data set. What we're really doing is for a preset filter, a particular filter of, for a different context. So ideally, if we were able to just have an endpoint where we have the data and we pass it a bunch of query parameters, programmatically, right? But from the UI, it'd just be like a drop down with like preset filter for a context. If you really wanted one table to show the data in different contexts. For now, I think the middle ground in the past for prior projects has been having completely different tables that might be based off the same data set on different tabs. And then when we find like the most useful use cases, if we really want it in one table, if you really want to do that, then you could have like preset filters that would hit the same endpoint, but then have the data filter back if you wanted something like that in the long run. But I think the safest bet would be having some form of tabs so we're not blowing away the existing context that we have, is what I would suggest.
Now, jumping down to the next thing is, are there cases where the way we deal with vulnerability dependency depends on the license under which the dependency is published? For example, users might be willing to fix if they can fork the dependency without causing legal issues. So I haven't heard that specifically from any of our customers, like that example, but definitely if when I'm looking at a dependency, I'm going to consider like if, and this gets into a risk scoring backlog item. If this hasn't been updated in a while or they don't bug fix in a while, I might consider forking it because I don't trust them to fix their own bugs because maybe they're very, very slow. So there's definitely data about dependencies or data about licenses that could influence the way I choose to do it. But mostly that's in regards to risk. I haven't heard it in regards to licenses.
Actually, as a follow-up, I had an idea of like, what about like, so instead of adding new tabs to the license compliance page, because I feel like that may confuse the context of what it's the license compliance page is supposed to be. What if we add a new section in the nav? So we have dependencies, we have license compliance, we add a new section, but that page, because these are built as reusable view components, that new page could then just have the license list, not the policies, because we're not worried about like the policy tab in that context. And then the second tab would be whatever we had from the dependency list. So like, it's essentially a new view making use of the tables that we already have, at least for version 1, and see kind of like, because my concern about adding just new tabs arbitrarily to the license compliance page is that it's taking away from what the license compliance page, that like
Yeah, I'd actually almost end up adding it to the dependencies area.
Oh, okay.
And be like, see your dependencies along with their license stuff, and see how many people wanted to interact with that option, however that option was. And if that was a popular option, I think maybe have like, you know how there's the new thing that pops up that says like, we're removing a lot of stuff in 13.0. Go read this blog post. If that's targetable and they interact with that option that we gave them, I want to see if we could have like that pop-up happen. Like, oh, hey, you're checking out our new page. It's, you know, in its first iteration. Could you give us some feedback about it? Except I don't know how targeted that yelly banner is yet. Has everyone seen that, or is that just me?
Yeah, it's the bottom right corner with a little speaker icon, and it's.
So that's, yeah, I think licenses has a very different persona right now, and that would probably be the second thing I'd want to deal with. The first thing I want to improve on the license page is give them a button to like update this, because I don't think they care per se. That persona cares. They just want it fixed, and so I just want to give them a button that maybe like translates it. But I don't think they necessarily want to see it. Whereas on the inverse, when I'm in the dependencies, I may want to see that other data, if that makes any sense. So from a persona standpoint, I think adding licenses to dependencies is actually something that a manager might want more than the compliance persona. And then the other point that's in here is, by design, since we combine data from different scanners, we might have duplicates that the backend's not able to merge. And that's something to keep in mind. Do we dedupe at all right now for dependencies or licenses, or not really?
Can you define dedupe?
If the exact same project has the exact same dependency with the exact same version, but maybe it's referenced twice, does it show up twice?
It should show up once. So in the sense that deduping, I believe, currently is based on name. I don't know if we can't do version and license at the moment because we don't collect the version in the license list or in the license report. There is an open bug for that that is solvable. And so I believe when we merge the dependency list report with the license list report, we do it based on dependency name alone. So version, as we mentioned, is a potential problem there, but which is more problematic in NPM projects. Some of the other project types don't seem to allow for multiple versions of the same dependency. So yes and no, we dedupe.
So it sounds like there's 2 or 3 bugs lurking out there that ideally we'd want to address first before we did this.
I think so. I think if we could add version to the license report, that will help with some of that dedupe you mentioned. And I'm just looking at the URL that Philippe sent. The data that the license or the dependency list has, name, package manager, version, location, and licenses. So it does not have the classification, so the policy associated with the license. And then the data that the license list has that dependency list has, that's not in the license list, is the location and version number. So we could probably at least make sure that we're producing the same data from both reports, and then that way some of the deduping issues would be resolved. I think in the back of Philippe's head, he's saying, damn it, Mo, just attach the license info to the existing common report structure, and then we don't have a problem here. And Mo's slowly catching up and starting to understand why now.
So one item we have in the backlog, which I'm wondering should it happen in parallel to this, was the thought that we enhance our current dependency module when it does the scan to also do the license work. And I believe we identified 2 benefits to this. One, we wouldn't be dependent on open source projects, which we've had interesting experiences with. related to like trying to get them all to work offline. Thank you, Mo. But like, so would possibly starting to do that for our top languages put us in a better position? Try that for, you know, one language or whatever, be like, this is easy enough. It's an increased benefit to this long-term vision, and start being able to do that? Or is that not related and I'm making an association that doesn't make sense?
I think it is related. I just don't know the timeline to make that happen. So if we were, so the missing piece of information that I think we're missing in the existing report structure that we're producing from the dependency analyzers is just the SPDX identifier. And if we could include the SPDX identifier in that report, then at least when we, you know, aggregate the dependencies, we know here's the software licenses associated with that dependency. The other thing is I'd like to get the URLs for each of the known software licenses in the software licenses table in the database. That way we don't have to produce that URL as well in the report, which is just like a duplication of effort. It's like, it reduces the amount of work that needs to be done in the analyzers. So like at a minimum, I'd say like, if we could just get this SPDX identifier into the report, then that moves us forward quite a bit. Because then that, you know, dependency analyzer report would have name, package manager, version, location, and the SPDX licenses or identifiers. Then if we were to add the software license URL to the software licenses table, we could then display everything that's necessary in both the license list UI as well as the dependency list UI that's related to a software license, such as the name, SPDX identifier, and the URL to go visit that. And there was one other thing. Oh, and the policy associated, so the classification for that particular license. So that, yeah, that would work. I just don't know how quickly that would be. Another approach is we could add the version to the existing license list report, which I think would be faster. But again, it's, I know there's like, I don't know. I don't know what the priority is on that, right? So in one case, like if you add version to the license list report now, you'd get that for all the different project types. Mm-hmm. Then that'd be available sooner. If we added the license, the SPDX identifier to the dependency analyzer, we'd probably have to go through each analyzer one at a time, which is a good thing going forward long term.
No, we don't have that many dependency analyzers. Am I lying?
We have, correct me if I'm wrong, Philippe, we have Gymnasium, Gymnasium Python, Gymnasium Maven. And those are like the three, I think. And then within Gymnasium,
and then there's like two or three open source ones. So I think it's like, is it a total of 5 or 6, which is way better than the 13 for licenses.
Vendor audit.
Yeah, I think
audit, yeah.
It's like 5 or 6. So it's not a insignificant 5. Okay, it's not an insignificant amount, but it's not a huge amount either.
Philippe, is there a way to like use the license management analyzer as it is today, but have it feed pieces of the report that can be aggregated into the full report? Or does it have, or does that code, I guess what I'm saying is like, do we have to go through the dependency analyzers and add the licenses there, or can we do it from a separate analyzer? Because if we could, what I'm thinking about doing this in pieces, like if I could get the license management analyzer to produce JSON that could be utilized or like merged into the common structure that just has the missing pieces, then at least we have a starting point for getting the missing information into the common report structure.
On the paper, yes. The only problem that you have is, as you don't share the same layers, the detection layer, for example, will not be the same. So you might have a discrepancy between what the dependency scanning analyzers will detect and what license compliance will detect. And if you're not able to match the dependencies, that's going to be tough.
All right. So if the detection of...
Here's a batshit question. Like our feature flags are not what I think of as feature flags, but if we were to, let's say, add that SPDX identifier when we scan for the 5 scanners for dependencies. And we added a feature flag, but we left it off by default. We just like mention it in a blog post, like, hey, we're looking at this. It's not for all languages. You know, we're starting with this one language, so it's only going to work for this one language today. Feel free to turn it on if for funsies.
For funsies.
For funsies.
I love your terms.
And so like we could literally just start with one, but we could do it for one internally that we're using. And so we add it for the one, we see how it looks, we see what bugs we run into, and if people want to turn it on, they can. And then we just kind of keep. Would that be a reasonable way to keep inching forward?
I would prefer to start with one at a time and
this
do it
way
in a way
it's
so
not
that
like we have to do all 5.
Right. So you do one at a time. You would insert the pieces of data. In this case, we just add the SPDX identifier for the license, let's say just for one scanner type. That data would be in the report. It may be dormant for a while before it's fully utilized in the Rails app. Maybe what we do is I'm just going to pick one. Which was the top of your list there? Maven. So let's say for Maven, we added the SPDX identifiers for each dependency that's detected in the common report format. Then we go to the Rails app and let's say we start parsing that the actual SPDX identifier, and we include it as part of that intermediate representation we have in the objects. And then we find a way to shim in that data into the existing license compliance JSON. So this should not affect front end at all. We'd be producing the same JSON, but at least now we've hit all the layers. So we've made sure that we can get the license into the analyzer. We can parse the license out of the report. We can use that license information to provide the data necessary for the existing license compliance page, but just for one analyzer. And so from the customer perspective, it should have no impact. And then we can slowly do this for the next analyzer, until eventually the data that we had from the license compliance report is there, but not necessary. Philippe, what do you think? Is this a crazy idea? Am I off base on this? What am I missing?
Sorry, you got me multitasking. Could you just repeat the last 20 seconds,
yeah.
please?
So, okay, the idea that I was proposing was instead of doing like a wholesale replacement, we do piece by piece. So we start with the highest priority. In this example, I provided Java Maven as the example. And so the goal is to be able to produce a list of software licenses associated with each dependency and put that into the existing dependency scanning report. And the proposal was we start with Gymnasium Maven, and we add the SPDX identifier into the report for each dependency as just a starting point. So now that analyzer is now producing a new report. It's including the SPDX identifiers, the license info for each dependency. And the next layer would be going to the Rails app and actually starting to parse out that new piece of data from that report type, and then trying to get that new piece of data instead of from the old license report, from the dependency report, particularly for Java Maven projects. So it makes the code a little bit ugly as an intermediate state, but at least we're getting that data from the dependency report rather than license list report, specifically for Java Maven. And then we can make sure that we can surface the same JSON that we're serving today in the license compliance page, but sourcing just the Java Maven project types from the dependency list report rather than from the license list report. Then we rinse and repeat for the other analyzer types to eventually no longer needing to source any data from the license list report. And from the customer perspective, it should be, it should have no impact. The features continue to work the same. It's just, we're just shifting where the data comes from and where it's produced. The part that I don't know is like if it's better to update Gymnasium Maven and also do the license detection there, or if it should be in a separate analyzer. And this is the part that I think you could fill me in with the goal there is.
I would keep that in a same analyzer because you already have all the dependency tree, so it's not a big deal, I guess, to extract the licenses from there.
Because we already have to talk to the repository. We already have to pull API data.
Yep.
Like, I feel like it's a very inexpensive add to just get a little bit more out of it.
Yeah. I'm hoping I can just add like one field or called either licenses, which is an array, or licenses, which is a string that is an SPDX expression. because with the different SPDX expressions allow for license A or license B, license A and license B, license A with exception, which is hard to represent today with the arrays. So that would be what I would propose, is to use the SPDX license expression so we can accommodate or, and with. And if I could just shim in like that one field into the report for each dependency, I'm trying to be cute and convince you. This is my cute convincing face, Philippe. Then at least we have a starting point for representing the different types of ways that you could express your software license for a dependency. We start providing that data from the dependency analyzer report, and then we sort of decouple when that data starts getting utilized, because the Rails work can be separate from the analyzer work. And you're very hard to read.
The problem that you have is you will still have the license scanning running, right? So still
and it will be scanning for a little while. Yeah, so there'll be a little bit of duplication until we've done all the analyzers, and to the point where we no longer
even
so
once we do them, there's still some right now that are supported in LC that aren't in any of our dependencies. Like there's a mismatch in the language.
Oh, right, the project types. Yeah.
So for a little bit, it would have to be both.
Or, okay, so I'm just brainstorming, throwing out ideas.
Because like right now I'm looking at the dependency page. We've got component, which includes version. I don't know when that populates or where it populates from, but we've got a version. It says what package manager it's coming from. It has a location. It has
path to the file.
It has a thing that says license, but there's no license displayed. That's not useful. And then we have under license how many vulnerabilities are detected. I'm slightly confused right now, but that's fine. So like if my goal was under a flag for, we'll just say Maven or whatever, to have it check for the license while it's scanning the dependency and populate that so that just for Maven stuff, if I had the flag on, when I looked at more information or whatever, I could have a little thing that said I'm MIT or whatever. Like, would I have to do all 4 of those things you were proposing, or would we just have to do like the first plus feature flag?
I don't know if I'm the right person. Like, I know the license management analyzer like probably better than anyone, and I know I can improve that. And so I'm guessing at some of the steps necessary for the dependency analyzer. So I think so.
Because what I'm wondering is how many days I'd have to give someone to do a proof of concept for one language to pull enough license information to potentially show it, and maybe have it like a toggleable show or a collapsible show, or we could kick ideas around with Kyle. But like, because I just like having somebody try it out for X amount of days, and like let's say they're like, okay, I'm like 90% done after 5 days. Okay, that's worth pursuing. Or like I'm like 10% there after 5 days. It's like, oh, okay, we need to think about this a different way. You know what I mean?
So here's the honest truth: is like I don't know Golang. I know Ruby, and so like even if let's say you were to give me the proof of concept, like the opportunity to do proof of concept, the time it would take me may not be like truly representative of the time it would take, because a proficient Golang programmer might be able to do a better job. Where I might be able to aid that proficient Golang programmer is in terms of like the effort that or the knowledge that I have in terms of like aggregating that license info. So with a proficient Golang programmer who understands like the common architecture, and let's say you focused on one analyzer with my guidance in terms of like how to get that license info.
So like had 2 people working together or whatever.
I would say that would probably be a better representation of the time and effort it would take.
So would it be fair as a result of this for me to come up with I think 13.1 is kind of full. I'll look at 13.1, but either like 13.1 or 13.2 to have like a proof of concept research project. Talk to Olivier and see if I could get 2 people assigned for 5 days, 1 week. And, like, I think 13.2, because in 13.1, we should discuss, like, what exactly do we want to test out? Which analyzer do we want to test out adding licenses to? And the project just being like, how hard is it to add license data, to fetch and record properly licensed data when I'm doing a dependency scan, and see what happens.
That's reasonable for time. For me selfishly, it's like I'd love the opportunity to get a chance to learn Golang. I'm going to be slower, and but
or like a week.
Maybe, I don't know. Give me a week. I don't think there's
just
much
a week. I guess you just need that. Honestly,
I've read the Golang programming book. I understand like everything.
You could help out who's ever doing it, and then that would help you understand more. Like as they're doing stuff, you could ask like, why did you do that?
If someone's up for pair programming with me to get me going on Golang, there isn't much there. I have to learn the standard library and the idioms and the way that we do unit tests and integration tests, etc. So it's not like the language is hard. It's all the things around it to make someone productive in the language and knowing the tools. And I want to immerse myself in it. Like I'm still a Ruby programmer. I love Ruby. I don't see myself leaving Ruby, but in order for me to survive in this group, I do have to pick up some Golang skills. Otherwise, I'll be looking at problems from the lens of like trying to fit it into a Ruby solution, which may not be the healthiest for the group, especially since the group is majority Golang devs and I'm on this island of yay, Ruby. Nobody wants to come play with me. So I guess if I'm going to make friends, opportunistically, this might be a good opportunity for me to also learn Golang, as well as learning our common architecture, as well as utilizing the license detection knowledge that I've gained from working on the license management image. And with the a pair that could afford to do synchronous pair programming, that'd be great. But I also think I could do it without, if that's reasonable.
So I think
okay, yeah, there.
circling back, I think that there was like 3 big issues identified. Yep, runaway. We're closed up, but runaway. So I think dedupe is a concern. I think that the language mismatch is a concern.
Oh, right. That we support some languages in license management,
one and not the other.
Okay.
I mean, these are not blockers, but like we have a different language set for licenses and dependencies. We potentially we could run into issues with dedupe, and then data overload. I think were the kind of 3 main concerns that everybody had, unless anybody remembers any other major concerns.
Just a side thought on that, like I'd love to be able to finish the offline work for license management, because that's giving me a lot of understanding in terms of how license finders.
Well, you've got to finish that. You have no choice.
I know. So I'd like to get through all the project types if that's possible, because then I think I could use that knowledge, or sorry, I keep saying but I think we could then use that knowledge to add license detection for the other project types to the dependency analyzers, and maybe also use that knowledge for doing the like filling in the missing pieces for the project types and dependencies. So hopefully I can at least finish that and then say goodbye to my beloved Ruby. I will miss you so much. You've been so good to me.
You are ridiculous. You can have multiple languages. You don't have to pick just one. It's not like
I know.
It's more like snack
but
cookies.
it's been so long since I picked up like a new language as my new thing, and it's time. But I am scared shitless because here I am. I've got the senior title. I'm like, can I still be senior in a new language? Let's see. I can. We'll figure it out. Be brave.
So yeah, I'm scrolling through. That was the major concern, but if nobody has any others, that's the major concerns. And it sounds like the next one is to do a proof of concept for one of our crazy ideas, which I think is, let's see how far we get if we just take one dependency scanning analyzer, add some license data, and then if that works out, okay, where can we expose it, being step 2. And then if that takes way too long, then we come back and we revisit.
I think then that would give us enough knowledge, like, so that one experiment with one analyzer gives us enough knowledge to find out whether this is a reasonable path to move forward, or if we need to rethink, without spending too much time designing. And analyzing before we actually get working software done. Now, Philippe, do I have your blessing on this? Like, am I driving you crazy with my nonsense, or is this falling in line with the Philippe master plan?
To be honest, it's been my 6 hours already today.
Oh, sorry.
Straight. So okay. It seems to be a good idea to me. We need to put that in an issue so that I can give some second thoughts. But I don't see any pitfalls like this. I will be happy, as I said on the chat, to pair with you, do some pairing sessions, since we are almost on the same time zone and I don't travel anymore for some reason, so I have some availability. I would be happy to do some more Go as well. I don't program anymore, so that could be a good equation.
Wait, I get to pair with you?
Yeah, of course. Why not?
That would be awesome.
If you want to, of course. I'm not.
I do.
But we can do that together. We need to check with Olivier, of course, if it's the right time to do that. But if he's okay,
I think it would have to be 13.2 because we're trying to finish up all the work.
Right.
But in 13.1, we groom the plan. 13.2, execute the crazy plan. I think I want to have 2 items going in parallel. One is how do we add license data to the dependency scan? And I think I want to make a separate item that's, hey, front end team, what information do we have that we're not exposing today? And what is some cheap information we could expose behind a feature flag today just to see how users respond to it if we ask them like a little query when we add it. And so I think I want to have those 2 going in parallel so we can start getting some user feedback as well as like some technical, how do we do this? So that is my plan.
Makes sense for me. Thank you, Philippe, for offering. I will take you up if I can soak up all your knowledge. Thank you. And hopefully give back.
All right, I will make this recording available on Unfiltered and share it with everyone, and I'll share the notes, and then if anybody has any other thoughts, they can add.
I always forget these are recorded.
Dun, dun, dun. Bye, peeps.